Money Talks with Cathy Yang, your intel on the Philippine markets and the economy. In the headlines, U.S. President Donald Trump pressures the Fed to cut rates as tariffs loom. Stocks drop a day after the Fed decides to keep rates steady. Cebu-based fuel retailer Topline Business Development Corp gears up for what will be the Philippines' first initial public offering of the year. Topline Chairman, President, and CEO Eugene Eric Laparasan Lim joins us live. As artificial intelligence ramps up work, human skills may matter the most. We speak with LinkedIn in Singapore. Now, two Philippine companies due to be included in the FTSE Global All Cap Index effective at the close of trading today, March 21st. We are talking about RL Commercial REIT Incorporated and DigiPlus Interactive Corporation. RCR is estimated to see an inflow amounting to $17.24 million US dollars, while inflows for DigiPlus will amount to $33.65 million. From a technical perspective, the inflows can lead to a temporary top for RCR in the short run. Any weakness, however, says Ron Acoba of Trading Edge, should still be taken as a window to go long. It's still tracked to establish a fresh bull wave, as you can see here, from this recent pivot that we've seen for the complex bullish reversal. As for DigiPlus, the inflow also expected to lead to a temporary top for this stock here in the short run, and any weakness should still be taken as a window to pick it up at Acoba. The stock, as you can see, has already surged by more than 3 times since it cleared the previous record of 12 pesos per share. But Acoba says it still remains cheap, trading at 15 times PE at the current price. Maiden IPO is a pure fuel distribution play debuting at the Philippine Stock Exchange next month. It also happens to be the first company in Cebu to list in 10 years. Let's get to know Topline Business Development Corp and speak with its chairman, president, and CEO, Eugene Eric Laparasan Lim. Maayong buntag, Eric. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, maayong buntag, Cathy. Well, it's a pleasure being here. Thank you for inviting me.
And I thought I'd be speaking to you from Cebu via Zoom, but you're here and it's 11 days to listing. So how are preparations coming along?
So far, so good. We're quite happy with the take-up with the books and everything. So we're excited.
But you cut the offer price, the final price. Why so?
Well, I think it's more of the efficient deployment of capital. So when we started the roadshow process and the book building, and then we actually got the books are, the take-up is really good. So what we're doing right now is we're just getting that sweet spot from our investors, our shareholders. And in fact, if you look at the updated IPO proceeds, it's still there. The strategic initiatives are still there. So if you look at the listing, the story of the listing is basically more of importation, integration, and expansion. So the IPO proceeds, if you look at the breakdown, about 48% is still the expansion, which is the light fuels expansion, about 20 stations. And then the integration part is about 28% to basically buy an oil tanker ship to help with the integration of our different supply chains.
So we're talking about the full ecosystem here of being a pure fuel distribution company.
Exactly.
But you've got competition. And when I looked at how the competition's done, the listed fuel players in the market, they're hovering at lows because it's really been so difficult to make money in this industry and include to that really managing the efficiencies.
Well, it really depends on which segment of the market you're into. So let's say, for example, in Central Visayas, we're in that economic sweet spot in terms of GDP growth. So in Central Visayas, we've basically outpaced the national average for several years. So right now, we're just making sure that we're focusing on that Central Visayas market. And well, since for Topline, we're targeting a niche market. So let's say, for example, about 68% of registered motors are motorcycle drivers. No? So what we're looking right now is focusing on that niche market in our expansion plans for the retail.
Are you going to be buying any service stations or depots before the listing?
We are, well, there's always an opportunity, well, basically in terms of game plan. No? So there's, well, probably acquisition would be in play, or possibly certain discussions for partnership. It depends. So it would really depend. But as of now, we're just focused on the listings.
So you are having ongoing discussions now between now and listing date on April 8th?
I think if you're, well, if you're in the industry, you may or may not have a lot of discussions. But since the industry is not very big, especially in Central Visayas, you got to tend to talk to different parties that's also interested for possible acquisition. So it really depends.
Okay, but what really is certain is that you're going to be using the proceeds to buy some service stations and build service stations and depots, and
Correct.
also purchase the fuel tanker.
Yes.
So how is that going to then play into profitability?
Well, if you look at the proceeds, it's more of expansion for the service station. It's not the acquisition. So this is more of the expansion for the service station. So right now for light fuels, so if you look at the business model for Topline, so there's industrial fuel trade, which is commercial trade, which is basically B2B business. That's about 97.9% of our revenue. And then the other side is retail, which is light fuels. That's about 2.1% of our revenue. So now, as of this month, we'll be opening additional 2 more, which makes us 4 service stations. And then by the end of Q2 this year, we're looking at 10 stations. And then if you add the proceeds of the IPO, which is an additional 20 service stations, which gives us about 30 stations, hopefully soon.
And location would be critical, I presume, because we're talking
Exactly.
about motorists, wanting to fuel up as they take those rides along Central Visayas. Which areas?
It's going to be more focused on Central Visayas because, again, as what we've mentioned before, in terms of GDP growth, we're in that sweet spot, and
Some specific locations, perhaps?
so of course in Cebu, Metro Cebu in particular, and then northern part, southern part, and then other parts of Central Visayas. Since of course Bohol is also in Central Visayas, so there are a lot of really good areas right now that we're looking at.
And margins, what sort of margins are we playing on, given the competition in the industry and that it is quite difficult to make some money when you're a pure fuel distribution play?
Well, that's why, as what you mentioned earlier, Cathy, fuel is fuel, right? So what's the value proposition for Topline to our customers and investors? So what we want to do is to basically give a new dimension of service to our stations, giving additional service in terms of a really, really high kind of service, and at the same time, setting us apart in terms of other kinds of service pretty soon. So we're slowly innovating certain services soon, and we're quite excited to show that in the next few months.
You're excited, but the markets are fearful of what's going on. The volatility that we've seen, the PSEI is still down 3% year to date. Why now?
Well, at the end of the day, we can only speculate right now for the market. But for us in Topline, we're just quite happy with our track record for the past several years. So we've been, example for our CAGR, we've been growing for about 53% for the past several years. And in terms of revenue growth, we've grown from 2024 compared to 2023 about 12% of growth. Volume growth is 19%. Our net income is about 157% increase. So we're quite happy with our track record. And at the same time, when we have our company meetings, Cathy, it's just funny because we always tell everyone, like, guys, when we huddle up, guys, again, there's no perfect situation, but only a perfect mindset.
Right, and you're taking that dive on April 8th, and the offer period begins on Monday, March 24th, and ends March 31st.
31.
I wish you all the best. Eric, thank you so much.
Cathy.
I'll watch you on the monitor when you list at the stock exchange.
Thank you so much.
Dagan salamat. Eric Lim of Topline joining us here live in the studio. And you are watching Money Talks in One News. Coming right up, Aboitiz Infra Capital is soon going to take over operations at the Bohol Panglao International Airport. And speaking of airport, you might find yourself traveling soon as fuel surcharge go down. Keep it here on One News. Welcome back to Money Talks. I'm Cathy Yang. Japan's inflation slows for the first time in 4 months, bolstering the case for the Bank of Japan, or BOJ, to hike rates. Over an hour ago, the Ministry of Internal Affairs announced core inflation, which excludes prices of fresh food, slowed to 3% in February from 3.2% in January. Headline inflation eased to 3.7% this month from a 2-year high of 4% last month. Japan's inflation's been hovering above the BOJ's 2% target for nearly 3 years now. The central bank believes core inflation is likely to increase this year due to high rice prices and easing of government measures to tamp down inflation. The Bank of England follows the footsteps of other central banks in holding interest rates amid slowing economic growth, rising inflation, and escalating global trade tensions. The BOE kept its rates unchanged on Thursday at 4.5%. Central bank governors said economic uncertainties led to the BOE's decision. UK's economy shrank in January, having stagnated in the second half of 2024. The BOE last month cut its growth forecast for this year to just 0.75% from twice that rate. This week, other central banks have kept rates unchanged. This Thursday, Sweden's Riksbank kept its policy rate at 2.25%. Last Wednesday, the U.S. Federal Reserve held interest rates steady at 4.25 to 4.5%, and the Bank of Japan settled the overnight call rate at 0.5%. The People's Bank of China left both its 1-year and 5-year loan prime rate unchanged. Checking on the UK markets, both the blue chip FTSE 100 and mid-cap FTSE 250 fell yesterday, Thursday, by about 0.1%, and the bank and defense sectors have led those declines. In a social media post, U.S. President Donald Trump urges Fed Chair Jerome Powell to, quote, do the right thing and cut interest rates. On Truth Social, Trump says the Fed is better off easing rates to serve as a backstop for his tariff plans. Powell cited uncertainties over Trump's trade and immigration policies that led to the Fed's decision. And a day after the Fed's decision, U.S. markets closed slightly down as investors still await clarity about the economic effects of Trump's policies. NASDAQ led Thursday's losses by about 1/3%. S&P 500 declined by 0.2%, and the Dow fell less than 0.1%. So far this year, the Dow is the best performer out of the 3 indexes, losing by just over 1%. Benchmark 10-year Treasury yields inched lower yesterday at 4.233%, and gold prices notched up for the 8th consecutive session, closing at $3,040 per troy ounce. Let's take a look at U.S. futures. They're pointing to a slight gain at the open when the markets trade later tonight, New York time. The Dow is up less than 0.1%, and both the S&P and NASDAQ rises by about 0.1%. Let's take a look at those Asian markets on the final trading day of the week. They've opened mixed this Friday. Australia's ASX 200 up about 0.1%. The Kospi index slips by 0.1%. And Japan's Nikkei climbs by 1/3%. Opening on a high note minutes after the government released its inflation figures. Are performing as we reach the end of the week. Let's take a look at the PSEI and see how that's open Friday. Looks to be higher by less than 0.1% at 6,325, pretty much clearing the 6,300 level. It gained yesterday, Thursday, by 0.1%. As for the Philippine peso, it's open today slightly stronger at 57.2 to the dollar. Peso closed yesterday stronger as well, continuing that uptrend at 57.22. Now with us now for more is Philip Hagedorn, the Chief Investment Officer at asset management firm Atra. So good to see you again, Philip. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you, Cathy. Thank you for having me, and thank you. Good morning to your viewers as well.
And I see that you've heard from Topline, our first IPO listing for the year, and it's a pure fuel distribution play. What do you make of it?
Awesome. I mean, I'm just happy that we're getting an IPO, right? I mean, I think, and I'm happy to hear that the money's being raised to grow the business, right? So I think that's the key thing. And, you know, I think notwithstanding the performance of the market, it's not been great, right, the last few months. I think small companies have done really well, and making good money, and this is a good opportunity for them to go public. So
And coming from the
I wish them the
regions in
best.
Cebu, because it's the first listing in Cebu in 10 years. So that pretty much makes a statement.
it does, you know. Thank you, Cebu. I mean, and you know, I think there's a lot of excitement. IPOs are a good way to get attention for the market, and Topline is the first one this year. We're hoping the mother of all IPOs comes this year as well.
I presume that's Maynila.
Gcash.
Is it? Okay.
No, Gcash is the mother of all IPOs. You know, I think it could be. It could be one that could be participated by many, many people and bring attention to the Philippines. That, you know, we have technology. We're up at the forefront of doing things in a digital way, and you know, it's a good story. So.
In terms of timing, though, I mean, is that something that we could set aside? Just go list if you're ready. What would you recommend? I mean, as a fund manager, given that the
For
PSEI
companies, you
still,
mean?
yeah, 3% lower year to date.
Well, first of all, I mean, there's many funds that are performing very well versus the PSEI. The PSEI, the structure of it, if you understand the index, is banks, property, and the holding companies that own them, right? And the banks have done very well. Their record profits, stocks are, I think, at all-time highs in many of the banks. But the property companies are trading more than 50% discount from where they were prior to the pandemic. And that's having an impact to the index. So the index is, you know, what are we, down 3% maybe
Yeah.
year to date?
Year to date.
We have a fund, the Alpha Opportunity Fund, which invests in small mid-cap companies, some that you talked about earlier, that are being put into indices. It's up 16% this year, right? So there are opportunities out there, and they're not, I mean, last year we had 7 magnificent stocks in the Philippines that outperformed the magnificent 7 that we know in the S&P. So it's a stock picker's game. It's not an index game because of the structure of the index at the moment. Although I think there's a lot of value in the index, and if I'm an index investor, I would be buying the index, but that's...
Let's take a look at your funds, because I know that you mentioned Alpha Opportunity, double digit, 16% above the benchmark. SDG Fund, it's single digit, up
Yep.
4%, and Soldivo Growth Fund, up 3%. So you can see there on the screen. Outperform, but not double digit. So what would be the
Well-
compelling reason to keep investing in these stocks when we could look maybe towards bonds, where you can get a return of north of 6%?
for the year.
Right.
This is year to date. This is the first quarter. Okay, so hopefully we can continue with those type of, I mean, equity gains should outperform fixed income under normal market circumstances. We have interest rates still a bit high, which is good because I think it's a great time to have a balanced portfolio. You shouldn't be all in one asset class or another, right? I think the 60-40 portfolio is back. And I think it's a good time to have that because you have good yield on one side and you have decent returns in equity markets on the other side. The other opportunity for Filipinos is to go global with that idea because global funds are available here today. So think 60-40. You don't have to be all in one asset class or the other. Safe haven fixed income was nice in the last few years. Interest rates are, if Trump gets his way, will be coming down. And I think that's the outlook that we have as well, that interest rates will be coming down. So
Just 10 seconds. Your thoughts, Bangko Sentral, what are we looking at for April 10th? And how
I think
deep of
it's still a
cut?
hold at the moment.
Is it
but,
going to be a hold?
Well, I think we're looking at 2 and now we're looking at 3 cuts this year, but starting in June. I think the Bangko Sentral will likely wait for the Fed, but we think rates will be headed down by mid-year.
All right, that's 60-40. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you so much, Philip Hagedorn
Anytime.
of ATR Asset
Good to see you.
Management. You too. And the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas may indeed cut interest rates next month if the economy weakens. Bangko Sentral Governor Eli Remolona says they could lower rates by up to 75 basis points this year. He also said there is a higher chance of a rate cut on April 10th, especially if inflation stays low. Inflation eased to 2.1% in February, well within the Bangko Sentral's target range. Meanwhile, gross domestic product grew by over 5% in 2024, missing the government's target range. The March inflation data comes out on April 4th, and the first quarter GDP data is on May 8th. Analysts say low inflation gives the Bangko Sentral room to cut rates. Nomura predicts the 75 basis point reduction, while ANZ expects 50. The Bangko Sentral will act to prevent the swings in the peso, especially if it weakens. Remolona says the weaker peso could fuel inflation, so the Bangko Sentral must resist it. Recent interventions helped ease peso volatility from a 4-year high in November, but concerns over domestic politics hit Turkey's lira and Indonesian stocks, keeping the central banks on alert. The Bangko Sentral chief says volatility may rise again if the dollar regains strength. He also said the peso might be at risk of breaching its record low 59 level from December. Aboitiz Infracapital will take over operations at the Bohol Panglao International Airport this June under a 4.5 billion peso 30-year concession agreement. Bohol officials welcomed the move as AIC promises more flights to the province. With flights increasing, Governor Aris Aumentado expects higher tourist arrivals and increased tourism revenue.
So na ang Taiwan, saan for they're coming na, no? Vietnam, China doon ta mo may number mo may suki sa buhol kanito. Korea na we have 6 flights.
Even before the takeover, direct flights to Taiwan has begun in mid-March. Tagbilaran City also expects a tourism boost once the new operator brings in more international flights. Now, speaking of airport, airfares will be cheaper next month. The Civil Aeronautics Board has lowered the passenger fuel surcharge from level 5 to level 4 for April. At level 4, domestic flights will have a surcharge of 117 to 342 pesos. Meanwhile, international flights will see a surcharge ranging from 385 pesos to over 2,800 pesos. The reduction comes just in time for peak travel season. Fuel surcharges are based on jet fuel prices, which dropped to over $87 per barrel as of mid-March. Airlines expect jet fuel prices to drop this year as global demand for diesel slows because of the shift in renewable energy. Communication is the #1 most in-demand skill in 2024, says LinkedIn, because leaders and companies understand that artificial intelligence is the most powerful when collaborative humans surround and lead it. Well, with us now for more live from Singapore is LinkedIn's Head of Growth Markets and Country Lead for the Philippines, Atul Harkisangka. Good to have you with us, Atul. Thank you so much for joining us.
Good morning, Cathy. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you know, I was pleasantly surprised it's communication atop the totem pole, as I thought all along that communicators who don't enable their work with AI are first to be replaced by AI.
Yeah, AI is a hot topic, but let's take a zoom out and really understand what's happening in the workplace. Now, with LinkedIn, we are in a very privileged position to have a bird's eye view of the global economy. With 1.1 billion members, 70 million companies, and at any time about 20 million jobs, we see how the data is flowing between these different nodes. And one of the things that I'm particularly tracking is the rise of AI-related jobs, and thus the skills needed to do these jobs. In Philippines, for example, over the last year, we have seen a surge in AI-related jobs. Over 3,000 new jobs that need AI skills are on LinkedIn now, just in the Philippines. And thus, naturally, the skills needed to do these jobs have to come from somewhere. And we see leaders, educators, people like you and me investing in ourselves to continuously upskills, not just on AI, but other related skills as well.
And also on human skills, because that's going to be even more coveted or relevant in an AI world, the likes of empathy, relationship building, crisis management, conflict resolution. So how do we make sure that when we upskill, these intangibles also come together in that package?
Absolutely, so spot on, Cathy. Because when AI starts to do some of the mundane daily tasks for us, we free up more time. As leaders, now we have more time to network with our people, really understand what's going on with some of our customers. And that's where the human skills, the people skills that come into play. In fact, in Philippines, we see that the top 6 out of 10 in-demand skills are actually around people skills, as you said rightfully, around communication, critical thinking, problem solving. So as much as we are focused on upskilling ourselves and our workforces in digital and tech, we need to focus on people skills, human skills.
So can these be taught in projects, internships, curriculum? Do we embed the AI in these versus going for a sandbox approach where you allow the students to experiment in AI, so by the time they're in the workforce, they become AI natives?
Right, great question, Cathy. So when we think about people skills, I tend to think of how can we enable workforces and students to learn versus us teaching them. And learning people skills is very different from putting students in a room or workforces in a amphitheater and say, hey, do this course or finish this learning. It really has to be very experiential. And that is where we are leveraging our AI technology and tools to expose the learners to modern age tools like role plays. So with AI technology and development, a learner can now go online on LinkedIn and chat with a bot around soft skills. So if you want to have a conversation with your colleague, if you want to give someone a performance feedback, and that's where AI really helps to augment the work that we are doing and get better on the soft skills as well.
Yeah, that's very encouraging. The human in the loop is never going to go away. We just got to be enabled by AI and just embrace it. Atul, thank you so much for joining us and for your views. I much appreciate. Atul,
thank you for having me, Cathy.
Of LinkedIn. And as we end the work week, check out Wonderland Music and Arts Festival happening this weekend. The artist lineup for the 10th year celebration includes Daniel Caesar, Hon, local bands Mayonnaise Urban Dub, and a lot more. Children can also join in the fun as there is a dedicated space with interactive play area and kid-friendly activities. The two-day festival kicks off tomorrow and is going to be held at the Philinvest City Events Grounds in Alabang. And don't forget those dancing shoes. That is it for Money Talks with Cathy Yang. Catch us again Monday, 9:30 a.m. here on One News. Have a great weekend. I'll see you Monday.